Okay, in today's video, I want to talk about the commander that, quite frankly, we're forgetting about. We're forgetting about him. We need to not forget about him. You need to remember how good he was when you drafted him and the reason in which he fell as well. So let's have that conversation. Let's have that conversation and let's talk about Jer'Zhan Johnny Newton. All right, we're also going to talk a little bit about uniforms later in the video, and we're going to kind of get into that. But I want to talk to you about why I truly think Johnny Newton could be a breakout candidate for this team. And it's not just because, that's the easy one. He was the second-round pick, number 36 overall, that didn't get to play much last year. There's so much more. Well, he did get to play, but he didn't play at an elite level. All right, but there's so much more to it than that. There is so much more to it than that. When you look at him last year, he was rated on PFF 51.6 overall grade. That is 138th in defensive interior linemen out of a 219 that were qualified. All right, so a little worse than average. All right, you want to be in the top 80 to be a solid starting defensive interior lineman. All right, really top 64. All right, his pass rush grade, however, was 73rd. It was the run defense grade that he struggled with a little bit. But there was so much more to it than that. When you look at Johnny Newton, you have to remember he was a top 15 and the number one interior defensive lineman by many analysts when he came out in the 2024 NFL Draft. He was a back-to-back All-American at Illinois. He was in the Big Ten going against the best linemen, and you can make the argument that the Big Ten isn't the best offensive and defensive line in the country before they've won it each of the last 2 years. They've won the national championship. The Big Ten is phenomenal in the trenches. They are phenomenal in the trenches. In his final 2 seasons, he had 13.5 sacks. He had 22.5 tackles for losses or something along those lines. He was awesome. He was awesome. All right? He had a slow start because of the injury. Let's talk about this injury. I want to talk about this injury for a second. All right? Newton had Jones fractures in both of his feet. Christian Wilkins of the Las Vegas Raiders right now is looking like he may miss this season after getting a Jones fracture injury in his foot in the middle of last year. I think it was like December of last year or something like that. November, December, somewhere in there. And he can't get back from it. But we're acting like we expected Newton to be this guy that was a phenomenal rookie at a position that, by the way, is extremely difficult to be a phenomenal rookie at. I can't count. I only need one hand, I think, to count the amount of people who are defensive tackles that ended up being like phenomenal in year one. It's not easy to do. It really isn't. And so not only is he dealing with that, they're ramping him up slowly in training camp. And what I always say is if you miss training camp, you have just lost the first half of your rookie year. So if you're a rookie going in, you weren't preparing to be on this team. You were preparing in the offseason to get drafted. That's what you were preparing for. So if you're injured and you can't spend that summer at all preparing, and then you're not even full speed by the time training camp comes around and you're missing a lot of training camp or you're unable to do a lot of things because they're easing you in, you're already delayed for about a half a year. Then, when you also have to be limited in the games because they're easing you back from this because the re-injury rate is really high. It's somewhere between like 12 and 30% re-injure this. When they have a Jones fracture, they re-break it. That's not good. All right, so all of this happened. Hey, we've made it clear on this channel. We started this channel because we love the NFL. We love talking about teams that seem to be ignored by the national media. But we are Detroit Lions fans. We don't hide that, right? And we saw this actually with some of our players too. Oftentimes it takes a rookie, especially if there's an injury, especially if there's something that happens. Jameson Williams, right? With Jameson Williams, he was coming off an ACL tear. So he missed most of training camp. Then they started ramping him back up in the middle of the season, and he lost his entire rookie season. He got to play like a couple of games. And then by the time year 2 came, it still took him time because there was a suspension and all this kind of stuff. Anyways, it wasn't until year 3 that he really broke out. Newton's timeline's ahead of that because he got to play in year 1. Now he has a full off season of continuing to be healthy, of continuing to be get in football shape, and continuing to understand the rigors of what the NFL takes. Not only that, when you look at his year, he didn't play in week 1. He never got more than 25 snaps for the first 5 weeks of the season. Then he had 23 snaps, 37, 35, and then it was in week 8 against the Chicago Bears that he broke out. He had multiple tackles for loss. He had QB hurries. He had a sack. Like, he was unreal. 7 total pressures. 7 pressures. Hit the quarterback 3 times, got a sack, and then he flashed, but he wasn't there yet. He had one more bad game. Other than that, every single game that he played was above his average. When you look at defensive score, that first 5 weeks was 5 or 6 weeks was nasty. Listen to these defensive ratings overall by PFF. 39.5, 59.9, 35.3, 52, 37, 33. Brutal. Then I'm going to give you some of the scores after. 89, 77, 62, 63, 75, 63, 62, 58, 72. He proved that he was starting to become a better player, and that still is with some of the struggles as far as health and coming back and probably conditioning and just adjusting to the strength that's needed in the NFL game and things that he just couldn't build up strength because he had those Jones fractures. You know what it's like when you can't work out for a long period of time. It takes time to get your body back to where it needs to be. So look for a big year from him year 2. Not only that, you look at guys like Grady Jarrett and Odighizuwa at Dallas, Grady Jarrett in Atlanta. These are guys who are similar, get up the field, pass rushing, wreaking havoc defensive interior linemen that had a ton of success with Dan Quinn, but not a ton of success without Dan Quinn. And I think with Quinn here, it will be good for Newton going forward. He will be good. All right, next, I need to ask you a question. Put it in the comments below. How do you feel about your jerseys? Like, I got to know. I got to know. There was a couple of recent articles that came out, and they were ranking jerseys. In this article that I have here, you're rated 29 out of 32. In a fan voted one, you ranked 32 out of 32, which, by the way, I don't necessarily agree with all of that. But I think the biggest issue that you have going against you is that it's simply not the Redskins uniforms. Is that the biggest problem? And if you went back to that kind of color, I know you have a similar color palette, but the way in which the uniform was worn, where would you be happy with that if you were still the Commanders? Like, what does that look like? Or do you think the uniforms are good? Like, I don't think they're a bottom 5 uniform in the NFL. I don't think they're a top 5 either, but they're not a bottom 5. So anyways, that's kind of what I'm wondering. Like, where are you at with the uniforms? Do you like them? Do you like them? All right. Thanks for watching. Hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Look out for the big man in the middle this year. See ya.